Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've had a wonderful week thus far. Firstly, thank you very much for all your support on the channel this year. I'm so very appreciative, and you guys have been so generous and kind with your comments. So thank you so much. Secondly, congratulations, because so many of you in the comment section seem to be absolutely flying. I'm not even talking about 100k ranks. I'm talking about 50k, top 20k, top 5k without any chips being used. And at this stage of the season, that is utterly exceptional. So well done. And I'll have something in the comments for the guys who aren't doing as well, a slightly different perspective. Today, I will be covering everything you need to know. Cunha versus Strand Larsen, captaincy, Rayan Ait-Nouri and Wolves just in general, Manchester United assets coming up, differential captaincies that you could consider, and a variety of other things, including Wildcard 12 and what you should be looking for and at going forward, which I think could be very, very important and hasn't really been covered anywhere as much as I've seen so far. So if you could subscribe, I would be very, very appreciative. Now, a lot of you who watch, 50% of you who watch regularly, haven't clicked that button. If all of you could just check if you've clicked that button. If you're unsure, you could just check. And if you could just press it, it'll take you a millisecond. And I would be so very appreciative as we push for 5,000 subscribers, which hopefully we can do sooner rather than later. As you can see, strong start to the season, 165k with no chips being used. And hopefully we can look to build on that and get a very good finish. Now, if I'm slightly quieter in this video, I am filming at a slightly awkward time and everyone is sleeping. That's the only reason why. But without anything else needing to be said, let's get into the video. We are going to come to Strand Larsen versus Cunha next. But first, I thought it would actually be good to offer my slightly different perspective on how the Wolves-Southampton fixture could potentially play out and then assess them with that in mind, because, of course, we need to look at the practical application for both of them. Okay. And I am really just thinking out loud here. I'm still very well aware that Wolves are the favourites. You expect them to score goals and you expect them to win with some sense of comfort, right? Some relative sense of comfort. Even if it's not too much, just a little bit of a cushion to be there. However, there are things which I think are being underappreciated when it comes to the Saints' quality. First of all, as I've spoken about many times this season, they are better than most people give them credit for. And one thing that's for sure is they have a lot more quality in the squad than most people think. Maybe it hasn't been platformed as well. Maybe it hasn't been shown in results given the slower possession-based model, which essentially maybe hasn't worked too well for them so far, but I think is improving and they are becoming more settled with using it in the league. So that's one thing to consider. I would not underestimate Southampton. Now, the other thing is, in the last two games, they've actually put in two very solid performances. Okay, yes, at City, Haaland accumulated X amount of XG, right? Like over 2. And they could have lost by a lot more. But overall, in terms of the performance, they were very solid. And they're not going to be playing City every week. And they're certainly not playing City this week, too. Not City at home. And then against Everton, obviously they won. And for the most part, at least by their relative standards, and I mean that with all due respect, they were pretty decent again. They limited Everton somewhat. And Everton really only started creating when Beto came on. Before that, Everton had very, very little. And, you know, the game's going to get stretched later on when both teams are looking for a goal, and he's a huge physical presence and a good athlete. So it makes sense that against tired legs, he would be able to prosper. Okay, so that's the historical side of things and where they're at as a side in terms of this squad. Now, let's look at things from a slightly more tactical perspective. Wolves thrive in chaos, and they like games where there are a lot of transitions. Look at the makeup of their side. I'm just going to assume they continue with this 3 at the back just for this game, even though I'm not sure if they will, but we'll assume that to be the case. They don't have a creative passer in the side. They really don't. So for their means of progression, it's very much getting it into the wing backs when they go high and allowing them to get into danger zones and carrying through there. It's diagonals from the centre backs into Strand Larsen and Cunha, who are both very, very strong. It's Cunha dropping in with his elite ball carrying ability, and that's how they progress up the pitch. Okay, they don't have a creative passer. Thus, they would like games where transitions are aplenty, because ball carrying and progressing in that manner are far more suited to those type of games. Whereas if you get a Southampton side who sits in, okay, and in general 3 at the back systems aren't really built for a slow build up, right? Because you have numerical inferiority in the middle almost often, so it's hard to build through teams. You'd have to go laterally a lot and then vertically a bit and then laterally vertically, and it'd be a very slow process, very slow process, almost too much so. And in general, you could shift across the pitch enough whereby you would never have enough numbers in the middle to get out. But that doesn't really matter because that's not going to be a factor on the weekend. But what does matter is without these type of creatives, if you don't give Wolves a game where they can transition consistently and they have an open type of game, for example, a game similar to what Brighton gave them, look where all of Wolves' chance came from again in that game, the game against Brighton. Just go and watch the extended highlights. And they were times where Wolves was in general very direct and there were many transition opportunities. Southampton, however, they've shown at City they can sit in. And if they decide to sit in against Wolves without that creative, do Wolves struggle? Yeah, I think they do struggle a little bit to break them down. The other thing is, I think Wolves can be hurt by Southampton going the other way. With their slow possession-based model, I certainly expect Wolves to come on to Southampton. And I've seen the quality. I saw it at the Etihad. They can get out. They're very, very competent from a technical standpoint, and they can get out and they can play through Wolves. And they don't even need too many numbers when they get into these advanced areas of the pitch because the passing sequences initially are so good and they can get their players into one-on-one isolated situations as opposed to like 1-on-2 and like trying to give it to a player and then getting him to do something. They'll put them in very advantageous positions. So in terms of Wolves' clean sheet prospects, I wouldn't say they're probably as high as maybe the bookies will make them out to be. And thus, when it comes to Rayan Ait-Nouri, I would be just slightly wary of that. And when it comes to Strand Larsen and Cunha, if Southampton do sit in, and especially if they get an early goal and they limit transitions by getting that low block and they essentially leverage the fact that Wolves don't have a creative, I can see this game being slightly closer than most expect it to be. Now, to go back to my original point, you expect Wolves to win and you expect them to do well. I'm just saying it's probably not as clear-cut as maybe everyone else is going to make it out to be, just in my humble opinion. Now, Rayan Ait-Nouri is someone I would very much like to have on my side for this week. However, there are all the obvious positives, and I will show you an image where he's in these absolutely brilliant positions that he was taking up against Crystal Palace, and his attacking threat at wing back is so big. And because they don't have a creative, one thing I've noticed is he's more than happy to drift into these half spaces and not serve as a creative, but just serve as an extra body with some technical quality, with the ability to function in small spaces, which helps Wolves' goal threat in general, right? So he's great. The only thing I would say with him is you don't need to break your team, or he's not the biggest priority in the world. And I, for example, had to weigh up whether I wanted him this week or not. And I only had Sunday night to do it because of the price changes, right? And it would lock me out the move. And I decided on no because I knew that due to the analysis that came before, Southampton have a goal in them. And if his clean sheet prospects aren't as good as I think they are, he's not that essential for this week in particular. Over a long period of time, like he's got this really good fixture on, I think he's great to have. But for a one-off week, I don't think he's the most important thing. And I would say using your transfers on attacking assets are slightly, well, it's a slightly better, more efficient usage, and at least a usage with more upside, because I really do think that Southampton, within a logical sense, right? Like, I'm not saying they're 100% going to score, but more so than the bookies will make it out to be. Just for reference, these are the type of positions he was taking up. He not only got into this position once, but he got into it many times. He made good penetrating runs into the box. He arrived in the box well. And if he can continue to do that over the course of that really good fixture run, he will undoubtedly get attacking returns, especially with his quality in the final third. One of the biggest debates in the community this week, and rightly so, because that million that we're going to talk about in the practical application section that you could potentially save, and the extra points you may be able to gain from a correct decision here, if it falls in your favor, well, that's a lot. And that is a big swing that could transform your season, genuinely. Right, it is a Taylor's oldest time. A or B? Can A cover B? Or should we just get both in this slightly unique situation? Now, I'm going to start with getting both, and I'm quite a strong advocate against. I'm going to tweet something tomorrow, which is something I've been thinking about. It's been in the draft for a couple of days. When it comes to attacking double-ups of any form, especially when it's two forwards, you need to have complete conviction, or you need to be very confident that the team that you're getting them from is going to do very well. The downside is tremendous because one bad fixture for them, two blanks, automatically, pretty much, right? I'm just going to assume they score 0 goals, or they score 1 goal, and neither of them are involved. Or even if they score 1 goal and they only get an assist between them. 5 plus 2 points, 7, 3.5 points on average each. If you were to times that by 11, that would be what? 38.5 points as a game week total. And then you add the captaincy to make it 42. But nonetheless, that is very poor. And this is genuinely what could happen. So I think if you're going to take an attacking double up, you must have complete conviction that they're going to score goals consistently, not only as a duo, but as a side. And that's you for the entire period, because the weeks that it goes bad, it can go really bad. I would also say the thing is the upside is actually not limited, but unrealistic. Because how often is a mid-table And in this case, a relegation side like Wolves going to score even 2 goals in a game, but let's just say 3, whereby it allows both of them to return to a very sufficient level. Because let's say they score 3 and Strand Larsen gets 1 return and Cunha gets 2. Okay, fine. Like Strand Larsen gets a 5 or a 6 pointer and Cunha gets a 13 pointer. That's a haul, and that's great. But that's probably within some sense of realism the best case scenario you're getting from a side like Wolves. Even that's not that much, right? Like that's less than 10 points per person. And if you were to go somewhere else, maybe go for who you think is the best here, and then the talisman from another team, I think you're opening yourself up to more realistic upside and less downside, without a doubt. Okay, and I just think you need to factor in that Wolves aren't the best team in the Premier League or anywhere close, and they probably aren't going to blow teams away, and they're gonna have bad games, and therefore I think that you're gonna have some really bad weeks if you double up on both of them. And for me, whilst they present value individually, when there's so many other good forward options, I would choose one and just be at peace with it. Okay, now let's figure out who we should pick. First, you need to ask yourself how much risk are you willing to accept? Because Cunha is undoubtedly a brilliant, solid asset, whereas Strand Larsen still has question marks associated to his name. Cunha has so many of the fundamentals. He probably has penalties, right? I mean, you saw Sarabi's performance. I doubt he gets too many minutes. Okay, then you've also got the fact that Cunha's on penalties. The fact that he's on set pieces, and the fact he's so good on the bonus system, and he's just the best player in that all side by a mile. And his overall quality will generate him returns when most players in the league just wouldn't be able to get them from those positions. He'll produce a magnificent pass, he'll carry so well and then finish by himself, he'll produce a brilliant finish, etc., etc. And you're going to get that out of Cunha. However, the second and most important thing is how important do you think this positional role, the zonal occupancy, and the responsibilities these two have in the side bear when it translates to their FPL returns? Because Strand Larsen is undoubtedly in a better position. He is the 9, and he's occupying those number 9-like zones. And he has to work very hard off the ball. In general, he's not really too much of a channel on it either. So he is very central very often. Whereas Cunha does a lot. Like when I went to watch Brentford Wolves, Cunha was popping up on the right touchline. He's meant to be the left-sided forward, left-sided midfield in that game, playing a back 4. And you'll see him drop deep to come and help progress and carry. So he'll have to do a lot of other things to take him away from his goal threat. Now, if he was in a better side and a side where they platformed him better for FPL and the system dynamics were more optimized for him, oh my God, he would be the most brilliant asset. But he's not. And therefore, I do genuinely think you could get away with going Strand Larsen, because I think Cunha hauling might be slightly rare just because of how much else he has to do, whereas Strand Larsen's always going to be in and around. Now, given the drop-off in quality, I don't think Strand Larsen will haul very often. But I don't think in the end, as a result of this positional standpoint that we just discussed, this zonal occupancy, role they have in the side, the responsibilities, I think Strand Larsen could be okay. And then when you come on to the fact that you're saving a mil and you can use it elsewhere, I think that's so important, especially when the premium defenders aren't really that essential this season. Just reinvesting that money ideally into the mids and forwards, which is where there's the most upside. And I think where there's so many good forwards who are actually in the expensive category that are coming up, for example, Watkins in Isak in 12, and that's why I say, remember this when I speak about 12, you're allowing yourself to gain some upside there, and it could genuinely go very well for you going Strand Larsen, because he is the guy who's playing in the zones that you like. And we spoke about zonal theory early in the season with Eze, and whilst he didn't return, he was very unfortunate to return. All of the underlyings, his performances in general suggested that he would. So to conclude, and maybe this isn't the conclusion you were hoping for or expecting, I'm not going to tell you that Strand Larsen is categorically better than Cunha, just like I'm not going to tell you that Cunha is better than Strand Larsen, because I don't think that to be the case. I think if you're looking for an asset where you pretty much know you're getting a very secure set of returns over a X number of games, you go Cunha with the potential for upside. He most certainly has that. If you would like to be, I'd say, slightly more aggressive in a play and go for the guy who's in the better position, knowing that Cunha could potentially be the assister of the assister, or maybe not have the same goal threat as him and use the mill elsewhere, I think I would go Strand Larsen. I think he's the more aggressive play, and I think Cunha is a slightly safer play. I don't see either of them going too badly. It's more likely that Strand Larsen goes badly for all the reasons, hence why it's a more aggressive play. But I think it's very much in line with what risk appetite you have and how you're looking to approach the game and what other assets you have. And when we come on to the Wildcard 12 section, you'll understand why I think saving that mil is so important because of the options I'm looking at and the type of forward line I'm looking at. Now, I love when you guys tell me that you do well in the comments, and I love seeing you do well. But purely from a competitive perspective, I would love it. I would absolutely love it to have Erling Haaland this week at 0% effective ownership across the board. Because for me, this is a stellar captaincy shout, not just in terms of the week, but in terms of the season. When you look at matchups and you look at one player against a specific team, I think this is a brilliant, brilliant opportunity. And then the fact that over 250,000 people have already sold him. People were selling him last week to fund Salah. People won't captain him because they think he's out of form. And you can argue that, I guess. I'd say the finishing's out of form, but that's about it. This is a tantalizing prospect. I'm going to do my best to try and convince you to captain him because I think he's the best option. So I'm only trying to do what I think is best for you. And I will therefore try and convince you to the best of my ability that Haaland should have your armband this week. And for me to go anywhere else this week, for the life of me, I can't understand it. There's one player I potentially can get on board with. It's not a Spurs player. And we'll talk about them in the next section or the next slide. But yeah, okay. Before we get into football stuff, a couple of things. One, I already mentioned that a lot of people are selling him. Over 250,000 people have already sold him, and that I checked like 3 hours ago. People sold him last week. A lot of people probably won't even captain him because he hasn't been scoring. So you've already got him as somewhat of a differential when you're going to captain him. I expect EO to be like on 30%. So you'll have him at 70%, I think, which is absolutely fantastic. And you know what? I'll bring that down to 120. You'll have 80% of Haaland away at Brighton. And now for the narrative time. City are notorious for coming back from adversity. And when they get beat, and they haven't got beat 3 times in a row since April 2018, but when this type of stuff happens to them, they always bounce back. And I just think there'll be a ticking time. I'm sure this time they don't have Rodri. And De Bruyne is being reintegrated now. I don't think he's going to start against Brighton because I think it's a bit of a baptism of fire to send a 30-something-year-old into the game like that, especially when I know it's Kevin De Bruyne, but it's not the point. I'm talking about his physical body, especially when like you're going to need him more than ever because you don't have Rodri to draw different players, but you just need that type of quality and that leadership on the pitch. I think it's not the smartest thing, especially when he's got the IB, just to continually build up his fitness and the strength of his body and sort out the injury. Okay, so that's the thing. I think when City face adversity, they are the worst team to play because they always bounce back. You could tell with Pep's interview. I think he loves it. I think he loves this type of challenge. People are starting to doubt, and he'll be like, all right, I'll show you. And you know what? People are human. I mean, people are human. Footballers are human. And I think these narratives, you actually have to factor in and give them some weight. Maybe not too much, right? Maybe less than I'm doing. And I'm not giving it that much anyway. But I do think you need to factor that in because footballers run off emotions, right? They're not robots. They're not just going to execute the same action again and again and again at the same quality because some emotion will kick in and they'll make a decision that they should or shouldn't have done. Now, let's move on to the footballing analysis. When I watched the extended highlights for Liverpool Brighton, I noticed that the one place where they were most exploited was through direct play and just quick vertical progression. And in this Manchester City side specifically, Haaland will be the main beneficiary of that. Now, there were times where the wingers got into the half space, specifically Salah a couple of times, and he didn't profit from them, but he very much could have. Whereas with City, with their wingers wider, I know Salah plays pretty wide for Liverpool, but given City's wingers are tasked with essentially breaking a lot of low blocks down regularly and are more used for their one-on-one threat to create as opposed to a source of goals, the ball generally, and you just all you have to do is watch a City game and look where the chances accumulated for you, and that is Erling Haaland because of the way they play and how they try and get the ball to him. Perhaps spoken about this like a long time ago as well. It's for him to get in the best positions, right? That's why the disparity between his volume of goals and everyone else is huge. Whereas at Liverpool, like you see Diaz this season, really good numbers. Gakpo, in terms of his minutes, really good numbers. Obviously Salah. Even Jota, in terms of his minutes, really good numbers. So with City, it's more focused on him, okay? And in general, they absolutely have the weapons to play this type of direct football that's going to be needed in certain instances with the game. And they can, of course, progress with speed vertically because they have so much technical quality in their side. Now, Savinho's back. Doku, I'm pretty sure, is going to start. He was on the bench today, so there's that. Foden's a huge transitional threat. And then obviously you've got Haaland as well. The other thing Brighton afford you is space. And the worst team to give space to is City because their technical quality is so much higher than yours. And now they have some serious demons on the flanks with Doku and Sevilla. Then you have Haaland running in behind and the fact that you're going to offer them space. I don't think Brighton the most physical side, right? Like if you look at the makeup of this side, they're not the most physical side. Take Belieber out of it, and yeah, like City won't have too many issues in that sense. Obviously, Brighton's transitional threat will be the main thing, but again, I don't think they have the best athletes in the league or like in terms of their athletes, Belieber aside. So I think the threat that they'll create against City will be probably a little bit less than people are thinking, just in my opinion. Now, they did really well against Liverpool, some really, really good build-up patterns and play to get past them. I actually think City will do a better job of mitigating this simply because they look for more control in games, and especially they probably look for it at the Amex, given they haven't had that recently. So those are the reasons I like Haaland a lot, and I come back to like the basics of that. They will have space. There'll be enough transitional opportunities in the games for him to profit. He can have space in behind. He's can dominate their centre backs physically. There's no Lewis Dunk. On top of what I mentioned beforehand. Okay, when it comes to turnovers, Salah profited from a situation last year where Brighton were trying to play at the back. They lost the ball and he scored. I think it was like game week 8 last year where he scored a brace. And I've just got an image of here for you to see and the fact that they will continue to do this. Now here, they're in their own box and this is a pass from the keeper into the pivot, right? So they're brave and they will do this repeatedly and they will try and build in this way because essentially they want you to come onto them to an extent. They want the fullbacks, which you can see in the image here. I believe that to be Veltman, to be free so that they can hit them with diagonals. They want to be taking the balls into your centre back and then dragging your pivot and then trying to progress with one pass into the 6 on the half term, and they can get in behind really quick with one ball. Okay, those are the reasons for doing it. The reasons for doing it aren't that important. It's just the fact that they are going to do it. And City are a very, very good pressing side, and they're also very intelligent, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if City nick the ball high up the pitch at least once, and Haaland and Foden to an extent will be the main beneficiaries of it as a result, I imagine. So that's something to note as well. This probably isn't that big of a deal. It's not, but it is a little bit of added EV, I would say, to the captaincy. So something for you to consider. Going back to the Haaland captaincy, and just to finish, look at the volume of chances he's accumulated in this bad run, right? In terms of points, it is a bad run. He could have had a hat-trick against Sporting tonight, comfortably. Could have had a hat-trick against Southampton. He could have had some goals against Fulham. He could have scored against... Who did they play? Oh, he could have definitely scored against Bournemouth, right? Missed some big chances. And he had a couple of half chances, which I think he should have done better with. It's there. The whole, it's so on the cards. And when you get a Haaland that's not going to be mass captained, and people are selling him, never mind not captaining him, I don't really see how you can not take the opportunity. When the likes of Salah have Villa at home. Now, big game Aston Villa are not an easy side to beat. Before we talk about them, let's talk about Salah. He's playing at a level I have never seen from a right winger in the Premier League before. The numbers he's putting up, and given the fact that he hasn't got the highest volume of instance, and he's not in the best positions as a result of the system, and for to still be putting up this type of output, it's a joke, right? And I expect no regression. Honestly, well, fine, if a minimum regression, maybe, but not really. Because he's just shown he can do it against pretty much anyone. And I'm really, really looking forward to the Liverpool City game in not so long, just to see how he fares there and how that game pans out. So he's going to get points, I think, across the season. But for this particular game, when Haaland's ceiling so high, I actually don't think his ceiling is maybe as realistic as it normally is. It's still there and it's still high and it's still realistic in an absolute sense, but relative to himself, usually I wouldn't say so, because I think Villa go to Anfield and they try and approach it with actually a game which is less transitional based, because Liverpool really can thrive there, and I think they'll employ this slower build up, which they have done so this year. The only thing is, one thing I can see Liverpool really catching him out on and Salah is when Digne goes up that left flank and Pau Torres, and they essentially are in a 3 at the back with 3 centre backs, and Pau Torres is in that wide channel. If Salah can stay high, almost similar to like he did against Chelsea, and catch them there, Villa could be in trouble there, because the one thing that this Villa backline lacks is just an overall sense of athleticism and physicality. That's one of the reasons why I think strikers have such a good time against them. Dominic Calvert-Lewin had a great time against them. Solanke to an extent, and we'll come on him later. But I've seen so many strikers just basically bully him, more so than you would like. So that is that. On the flip side, though, Villa have a huge side. They also have a lot of physicality in that side, and they're a very difficult team to beat because they themselves pose a large transitional threat, which you need to essentially account for within your own style of play and your system and your approach. Because Ramsey, Rodgers, Watkins is a big threat. And okay, I say here that I feel like you're only getting absolutes with Salah, and it's a slightly weird concept. I essentially think that with how good Villa are against the better sides, with the system that they're going to employ, excluding the Salah matchup thing that I talked about, if you can get Pau Torres one-on-one and stay high, I think you're only going to really get 3 types of games. Okay, you're either going to get a game where Villa play really, really, really well and Liverpool really struggle. A game where Liverpool play really, really, really well and Villa struggle. Or you're going to get an absolute deadlock. And I don't think you're going to get the usual type of game, because most games are never really those 3. They're like, oh, Liverpool played a lot better and they won like 3-1. But they weren't like stupidly dominant. But I think here you're going to get a game which is some form of an absolute because of the quality of the side, and 2 of those 3 would suggest that it doesn't go too well for Salah. And when Haaland's ceiling exists, I would be waiting personally for the captaincy, but definitely a hold. Now, if you didn't want to go for those 2, here are your captaincy alternatives. I would strongly recommend going for Haaland again, but the number 1 guy I would like outside of him, who I would have my vice captaincy on, is Brighton Visual. Bournemouth Brentford is a game that should just be utter chaos. It should be transition central. It should be high press on high press, 44 high press in against Bournemouth's hybrid high press. It should be space in behind. It should be, if you can punch the ball through the lines and vertically progress with a certain level of technical quality, you can do so very quickly, and you can turn teams over. Like, there should just be a lot of goals and chances in that game. Okay, and I don't think any manager is going to back down, and I can't imagine them actually taking a more pragmatic approach. So that means that Mbeumo will just have a lot of space in which to operate, and you get Mbeumo one-on-one with this fullback in general, high up the pitch, especially if you can be a little bit narrow, which you can against Bournemouth in terms of the wingers and just generally. Yeah, you're in business. The one thing is, though, like one-on-one with Kirkes, I think maybe he'll have to track back because Kirkes is up and down that flank so much. Saka had to do that. It was Foden had to do that a bit early on in the City Bournemouth game, and it was actually kind of his fault that they can first goal. Because he wasn't able to do with that. And I think Thomas Frank will look at that and probably give Brighton Mbeumo a certain level of defensive responsibility. He might be that 3 at the back, but I don't think he will do that against Bournemouth. Okay, so that's that. The other thing is on transition. I wonder if he will be the one who's being the final executor, and he's the one who's actually getting the goals. Because one thing against Brentford against Bournemouth that I've spoken about so much is the ball in those circumstances really, really often lands at the number 9's feet. So I wonder if his assist threat could genuinely be just a little bit higher this game. So that's something to consider. I don't think Bournemouth defended set pieces magnificently well. I thought City were always quite close to scoring, so maybe you can get an assist from that avenue. So overall, I think there's enough here. He's got so many avenues to the points that his floor is quite high. But the one thing I would say, right, and going to captain someone that's not like a Haaland, a Salah, a Palmer, is that these sides, like Brentford, they're not as good of a side as City. So you can't expect the same level of consistency across the board, and thereby you are accepting more risk. Whether you know it or not, you are accepting more risk, as good as Mbeumo has been, and as many points as he has put up. And that goes for all of these options. Cunha, I think, just reference what we discussed earlier. I think the floor is absolutely there, and if you completely disagree with my analysis of how Southampton could be a bit harder, go here. This would be such a good vision. If you think Southampton are there for the complete taking with the fundamentals he has, definitely. I think this could be a really good option. But I would just factor in what I said earlier and then just see where you land on that. Bruno, I like it. I think similar to Cunha, fundamentals are all he's even got more fundamentals than Cunha, right? I would say playing in this freer number 10 role where he has a genuine pivot for the whole game to protect him. Don't see like one of them making huge advancements into the midfield and trying to disrupt Bruno's space or make him drop deeper. And in terms of progression, they probably like solve it to just some small extent where he doesn't have to drop deep as much. I think having Bruno in this number 10 with the volume of attacking actions and the fact that they're dangerous, given his overall level of quality, his ball striking from outside the box, his ability in terms of creative passing, thereby unlocking a certain level of assist that others can't. I think really good option, especially when fixture that's Leicester at home. So yeah, again, I like it. If you want to take a differential punt, I wouldn't mind it. If you didn't own Haaland, I would be happy to say Cunha or Bruno. I think they have they're both slightly safer than Mbeumo, their own way to speak, probably because of the fixture. But again, I would go Haaland. And then Solanke or some. I think Ipswich might be the team to target at the moment out of all of the teams in the league. But the one thing with them is I've seen them in games have really good spells, but then they'll completely collapse in the other parts. Now, if they have a bad start against Spurs could really, really hurt them and score quite a few. But the thing with captaining Solanke or Son is, one, I just don't trust Spurs yet. Like, you know what? They've actually been better this season. They've improved defensively a lot. and they look like they're getting into a bit of a groove. They've thrown points away in a very Spurs-like manner this season at times, but they've actually probably been better this season in terms of the overall performances compared to periods of last where they were getting up a lot more points. There's a couple of things with their assets. So one is a spread of output. I expect Maddison to play this game. So you've got Maddison, Kulusevski, Son, Brennan Johnson, and yeah, those five. So that's one thing. As we saw against West Ham, if you don't get the right ones, that could be a bit of a problem because there is no real talisman there. The other thing is with Son, with his role, his volume compared to someone like Bruno or Cunha or Mbeumo of attacking actions is always a lot lower because they're restricted to that touchline, a relative comparison / extent. So that's something to consider. Solanke, yeah, he walked away with a 16 points against Villa, but I didn't think he was as good as people said. It was funny how the narrative shifted so much after he delivered those points, right? And it wasn't like he was accumulating a lot of chances for himself in that game. I hadn't really been doing so in the games prior either. He also isn't someone who still strikes me as a super high ceiling asset. I know he got a 16 pointer, but it was a slightly freakish circumstance. I mean, for him to generate 3 attacking returns in 20 minutes, given the way the game was going initially, it's pretty crazy. So yeah, the thing is though, it could genuinely be the best fixture. So I was just trying to present you with the other option. I don't mind it. I just think there's a lot of unknowns here and slightly more risk attached to it. For me, Haaland's still the best, but I don't mind a Spurs captaincy because we are targeting what is likely the best fixture. I just think, like I said, with Solanke and with Son, there are some downsides. Right, we spoke about Wolves' assets earlier because of their great fixture run. Now let's speak about Man United assets for their great fixture run, albeit it is significantly smaller. There are 5 assets that I think you should be considering for Man United and getting into your team right now. One is Haaland. I'm really not a fan of Joshua Zirkzee in terms of how he fits into this Man United side. I think I could see it more if Rashford was in the most brilliant form you've ever seen and they established a fantastic partnership. But that doesn't really look like it's going to happen. Therefore, in a league which is becoming increasingly physical and the athletic standards are just increasing and increasing, he's not there, and I don't think he ever will be. I think having someone like Haaland who showed really, really good things last season and is a player I really rate, and I still think is underrated by general public. For me, he's pretty good for expected minutes. And I think Ruben Amorim will happily be quite ruthless and keep Zirkzee on the bench and let Haaland accumulate quite a few minutes. He will be his channel runner, and he has brilliant fixtures even before he comes in Leicester at home, and then away when Ruben Amorim is finally hit. So I think he'll accumulate a lot of chances. Bruno will be playing in his right forward role, which allows him to stay higher. He'll have more protection, allowing him to do so. The volume of attacking actions will be there. He'll be in good zones for himself. So I think these two as a pair could be really, really good, and I like both. I have not really much negative things to say about either. Dalot, I think, again, great. He'll be playing in this wing-back role. I see him as practically undroppable. His superb technical quality, and this time it won't be used to invert, but this time largely just overlapping, will mean that assist threat from open play, I think, will certainly be there. And in general, we've seen wing-backs be super successful. Just remember Alonso and Moses, how successful they were. And I think they could replicate something similar with Dalot. De Ligt's a huge box threat, right? And again, these next 3 fixtures, they're really solid. Albeit Leicester do have a goal in them. Every side in the Premier League has a goal in them now. But Leicester more so than probably people give them the credit for. I don't think anyone's kept a clean sheet against them so far, so that puts it into perspective. But De Ligt's box threat is huge, and Leicester aren't the best at defending set pieces. So I think he's also pretty much a nailed starter. So you shouldn't need to worry about expecting minutes too much there. So another guy I think you should consider. Garnacho is interesting. Short term, under Van Nistelrooy for this game. Leicester at home, 90 minutes you expect. Like he's been clocking up pretty much every game recently, 5 or 6. Absolutely brilliant. But under Ruben Amorim, personally, as I'm going to show you the predicted lineup now, I think he should / he will be dropped. And let's go and observe that. So a couple of things with this team. I would say, one, I would switch Dalot and Mazraoui in terms of the flanks that they're playing on, or put Dalot on the right. And the other thing is, this is with the play currently fit. I don't necessarily agree with all of it. Maybe Johnny Evans isn't the central centre back. But you know what? Overall, apart from maybe that, it's really solid. And Mazraoui. This is what I think basically the team will be. Is if Ruben Amorim was here now, and it doesn't include Garnacho. So, because where does he really play, right? Like that left inside forward, I think Rashford's still undoubtedly a better talent, or he has a higher ceiling as a player than Garnacho, right? I really like certain parts of Garnacho's game, but as you know, I'm a huge Rashford fan. And I think Amorim would just play him in that channel because why wouldn't he, right? This is a Rashford type of role, not what he's been used to. This is a Rashford type of role. Give him an overlapping fullback, give him someone to provide width for him, let him operate in the half spaces, let him penetrate that last line and the space in behind, and you'll see what Marcus Rashford is really made of. Then you have Bruno Fernandes in this role that I think sometimes he can maybe drop into like a more 10, but most of the time occupying that right side into half space and creating a lot from there. So yeah, I just mainly showed you this to justify why I wouldn't have gone Garnacho, because where does he fit here? I've seen, like, for example, Jamie Carragher did a piece on Monday Night Football where he had him at left wing back. Personally, I don't think he's going to do that when he has Mazraoui and Dalot. I'm not sure about Garnacho's defensive capabilities, and that's basically why. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that so you understood where I was. Right, now I did this section for a number of reasons. One, I have had so many requests for what I think my best wildcard draft will be in Game Week 12, and also just when I'm looking at wildcarding. I'd say the most likely window I'm looking at wildcarding is in 12, hence I built a team, put some thought into it, like genuine thought into it in terms of rotation strategies, transfers, and now I am showing it to you so you know what you're potentially looking to build. And the other thing is, for those of you who don't have a wildcard, this is what I would say is the optimal structure, an optimal team to build to, because why would I build anything that I don't think is the optimal on a wildcard? Now, one caveat. Haaland scores a hat, and remember this is for Game Week 12, so you can ignore the fixtures. Haaland scores a hat-trick against Brighton. Am I going to sell him before Spurs at home, which is still a pretty good matchup for him, right? Maybe not. So just something to keep in mind. But there is a lot I like about this side, and we're going to talk about the transfer plans for it a little bit as well in the next slide, and we will talk about the forward. What do I like about this defense? Now, if you know me, I've been advocating for a much cheaper defense this year. And the only reason I don't have a 4.0 is because the 4.0 I would want is actually 4.1 in Harvard Bellis. And if I have Lewis Hall at 4, may as well just take the 0.2 for a Newcastle defender that's playing a fullback with his level of technical quality, which can probably get me an attacking return at some point. Okay, Sanchez has a brilliant run for a long period of time, and the ceiling side. I'm going to go through this very quickly because we will obviously have a dedicated Wildcard 12 video when it gets to Game Week 12 next week. Fabianski, I mean, if I'm having a starting 4 million keeper, why wouldn't I pick him? And a fixture run from 14, it's great. Dalot for the immediate upside in next 3 fixtures, and then he can be moved on. Rayan Ait-Nouri for the long term. Guardiola for the long term, because even though I'm going to bench Guardiola in this team at times, I'm going to bench him against Spurs and Liverpool. He's just got too much goal threat for me to bench, and like still have 0.9 in the bag. I need to spend it somewhere, right? I need to spend the money somewhere, and I don't really want Mbeumo in this team as much as I imagine some others would. So for me, Guardiola stays, and then Konsa, because the fixture run from 12 is pretty good as well, and I just like his box threat. So I think having cheap defenders that rotate well and have good fixtures, really, really nice. And this squad has a lot of depth, which is important because when it comes to the Christmas period, suspensions, injuries, and rotation, they're going to hit you. And I think having a squad which can handle that, and thereby allowing me to use my free transfers aggressively, which is so important and something I really want to do, is huge. I've got Cunha over Strand Larsen here because I just want to take the slightly safer approach when I can do so. So, for example, we'll have 0.9 million here, right? But he could be downgraded and I could use the money elsewhere. Nicholas Jackson, because Chelsea fixtures from 12 are brilliant, and they have like Leicester away, Southampton 12 and 14, hence Palmer as well. Semenyo, because this is this type of structure I'm going for. A lot of people here will have like Palmer, Saka, Salah, Son, and Mbeumo in this midfield. I would really like Bruno Fernandes as a potential keeper for long term, but if not, you'll see what I'm doing with him in the next section. I would also really like Ollie Watkins, where people have a cheap forward there, and then they'll spend their extra money in the midfield. But for me personally, these guys can absolutely do the job. Semenyo's run is great. Rodgers provides me with the depth. Villa's run from 12 is great. And yeah, I think this team is super, 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 super solid. I'm not that worried about Son. But I think, yeah, sure, at times he's going to get points, like undoubtedly, right? It's Son. But with his role, I think he's slightly restricted in terms of getting points regularly. I think Saka will be pretty good. But like the one thing with Arsenal is when they aren't good, and when teams play well against Arsenal, they usually look to lock up Saka because he is by far their best attacking player and by far the best creative player. Not only theirs, but probably in the league. So that's one thing I worry about with his return slightly. So yeah, I really like the team. We'll talk about the transfer plans a little bit, but I just wanted to show you it so that you understood what you were potentially building to. So there's a little tweet of mine there, which is for targeting fixture swings, because for Game Week 12 to 15, I would own Ollie Watkins, and then I would move him to Alexander Isak in 16 to target the fixtures against promoted sides. Similarly, Bruno Fernandes, 11 to 13. Leicester, Ipswich, and Everton. And the thing is, it should be 12 to 13. and then I'll get Bowen in 14 for his brilliant run. And now people will say, oh, with the way West Ham are playing, are you sure you want to make that move? Don't you want Brighton Mbeumo? Are you not worried about Lopetegui playing this very interesting brand of football and making very interesting decisions? We will phrase it like that. No, not really, because he's Bowen. The fixtures are so good, and when the fixtures get better, teams usually start to look better. And like I said, he always racks up points, and he's still done so, right? In a side that's not functioning so well, in a side that haven't had the easiest fixtures either. So I'm quite confident there. The last thing, and I think really important thing to discuss, forward category, because there are so many options, and I haven't even listed all of them. There's no Vardy, who I think could be a decent app, and there's no Job Hadra, and there's others that are missing. But these are the guys that I've seen talked about, or I think should be talked about, and I thought I would give a super quick section on them, just so you guys understand where I'm at and what you could potentially be looking at down the line. Watkins from 12 I really like. He's got 3 home fixtures from 12 to 15 that include Crystal Palace at home, Brentford at home, and Southampton at home. But Brentford, with their aggressive style of play, just in general, and aggressive defensive style, they're there for the taking. You saw how many chances Fulham accumulated against Southampton, like obviously a very good fixture, just like it is for Cunha and Strand Larsen this week. And then Palace at home, it's not the best, but like it's still good enough, especially when you have Chelsea away in 13, which I actually really like, because I think Chelsea can definitely be in terms of their defense, and I think United probably didn't exploit us as much as they should. But to be fair, first game under Ruud van Nistelrooy, and they weren't the best of form and didn't have a most established pattern to play, etc., right? So I think Watkins could do that, and I think he has a pretty decent record at Stamford Bridge as well. Pretty sure he scored a 9-pointer there last year. Isak would be coming in from 16. I think Watkins is more preferable than him between 12 and 15. I know some people are looking to jump on him on 12. The fixture in 12 is nice with West Ham at home, but then it's like Liverpool at home as well. He's got a tough away game as well. So for me, I prefer Watkins for that run. Havertz, I think, becomes a better option. Martin Odegaard is in full training, and with Odegaard there, he and Arsenal's creativity evolved because of Saka, and or sort of to an extent, like he'll get a lot better. And him not dropping into that false right role, I think you'll see the level of output that we saw early in the season, and him just staying at number 9. And he's so good in terms of his robustness, his availability, body, and being able to play 90 minutes game in, game out. And when Saka's not there, he'll be on peds. At least I expect so. So another guy that I really like, and probably being a little bit underrated at the moment just because of what Arsenal have gone through at the moment, but Odegaard probably plays against Chelsea. Havertz is basically back. Jackson, easy. I mean, the fixtures from 12 are brilliant. He's in brilliant form. I haven't really liked what I've seen from Nkunku when he comes into the side at 9. Big threat. And having a creative like Palmer behind you to supply, he'll accumulate chances. So great. Højlund, I spoke about earlier, so I'm not going to speak about again. Same with Cunha. Woods, I think this is the time to probably start to go off him. I think he's been absolutely brilliant. I think maybe you give it until Ipswich home. To be fair, Arsenal City aren't even defending that well. So maybe you just back the fact that he's doing so well. But I think when other sides have much better fixtures after Newcastle at home or after Ipswich at home, maybe take your points and run. Vissa, I quite like it. I worry just a little bit about the expected minutes at times, and I'm just not completely sold on going for Brentford asset. But I won't say too many negative things because I don't have too much support. More of a gut feeling. Good, I just don't think like unbelievable. Maybe not as good as other people think. I think that's a fair statement to make on my behalf. Raul Jimenez also isn't here because I think Muniz will probably eat into his minutes. And Brentford at home was a fixture I was really looking to target. And obviously blanked. Van Lissen, people have been speaking about him. I just think when Semenyo exists, you probably want to go there, especially when there are a lot of other good cheap forwards like Strand Larsen, who we spoke about earlier, who I think is great, and then Welbeck as well. He looks to actually be really solid for expected minutes. And with Brighton's runs, I wouldn't mind him as an option, especially if João Pedro's getting reintegrated slowly, so Welbeck in the short term, and Evan Ferguson doesn't look like he can start a game. So that's my very quick roundup on the forwards. What I'm going to do, because it's not as relevant, when I film a video in international break, I'll go on a deep dive on all of this, and we can have a super long video, like a special, and I will touch on pretty much everything you want. Just drop it in the comments now. And that should be really cool. It's a new idea that I literally just had. And then we can go into these guys on a lot of depth. But just if you are looking to plan from this week specifically, I hope that helps. And that is all she wrote, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed. If you got any value out of it, please do like the video. Please comment below if you have any questions. And of course, subscribe if you haven't done so already. I shall see you tomorrow for my team selection, which you'll be happy to know probably includes another transfer because wouldn't really be a G and team selection without it. Fun fact, I don't think I've rolled a free transfer in about 7 months now. 7 months, that's a long time. Have a brilliant, brilliant day. Make sure to make it a great day. Make sure to look for the pinned comment as well if you're not having such a good season, because it certainly can help. And just in general, I think maybe that little bit of advice could help you in life regardless. Have a brilliant day, like I said, and I shall see you tomorrow. Goodbye.